The person you love the most, the one you thought would never forget you, suddenly acts like you're a stranger. That day broke me, but it also changed me forever. This is my story. The day everything changed. I never thought I'd have to introduce myself to him. He used to know my voice even in a crowd. He used to look at me and smile before I even said a word. And yet, that morning, when I saw him after months, his eyes scanned my face like I was just another passerby. It was a cold morning. The city felt slow, the streets damp from last night's rain. I was holding a cup of coffee in one hand, my phone in the other, when I spotted him across the cafe. He was sitting at our table, the one where we used to spend hours talking about life, dreams, and stupid little things that didn't matter, but somehow meant everything. My heart raced. Months of silence had not erased my feelings. I told myself he probably missed me too. Maybe he had reasons for disappearing. Maybe life had been hard for him, like it had been for me. I walked toward him, rehearsing in my head how I'd start. "It's been so long." Or "I've missed you." But when I reached him and softly said his name, he looked up with polite confusion. "Yes. Do I know you?" The words hit me harder than any insult, any argument, any breakup. "Do I know you?" I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "It's me. Don't tell me you forgot." He tilted his head, searching my face. "Sorry. I think you have the wrong person." I couldn't breathe. My hands shook, and the coffee cup almost slipped. He wasn't lying. He really didn't know me. Or maybe he didn't want to. I walked out of that cafe like my body was moving, but my soul had been left behind at that table. The sound of his voice kept replaying in my head, calm, polite, distant. The complete opposite of the way he used to say my name. The streets were loud with traffic, but in my ears, there was only silence. I felt invisible. I kept asking myself the same question. How could he forget me? By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were ice cold. I didn't even take my coat off. I just sat on the floor, staring at nothing. I remembered the day we first met. It was at a bus stop, of all places. He had dropped his wallet, and I ran after him to return it. He smiled and said, "Maybe I should thank you with coffee sometime." That coffee turned into hours of conversation, which turned into years of knowing each other's hearts better than anyone else's. And now? Now I was a stranger. At first, I thought maybe he was pretending. Maybe he had some reason, anger, pride, hurt, that made him act like this. But then why would his eyes look so blank? I grabbed my phone. My fingers hovered over his name in my contacts. I hadn't called him in months, but his number was still there. I pressed it. My heart pounded as it rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. "Hi, it's me," I said, my voice shaking. "I saw you today at the cafe. I think we need to talk." I hung up before I could cry. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that moment, him looking at me like we'd never met. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to know the truth. I went back to the cafe 2 days later, hoping he might be there again. He wasn't, but the barista remembered him. "Oh yeah, he comes here a lot," she said. "Nice guy. Always polite. Keeps to himself." I swallowed hard. "Do you know his name?" I think it's Daniel," she replied, pulling a face like she wasn't sure. "Why?" I forced a smile. "Just curious. Daniel. My Daniel. The man who used to tell me he couldn't imagine a day without me." That afternoon, I found myself walking to his old apartment. My legs moved on their own, like they remembered the way. I didn't even know if he still lived there. When I reached the building, my stomach twisted. The door was answered by a woman, someone I'd never seen before. "Yes?" she asked. I hesitated. "Does Daniel still live here?" Her expression softened. "Oh, you must be a friend. I'm his sister. He doesn't remember much from before last year. He had an accident." An accident. The word echoed in my head until it didn't even sound like a word anymore. She explained quickly: car crash, head injury, memory loss. He had spent months in recovery. Most of his past gone. Some names, some faces erased forever, including mine. I stood there, frozen, my hands numb in my coat pockets. Her voice was gentle. "I'm sorry. It's been hard for him. And for us." I nodded, thanked her, and walked away before she could see the tears. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how fragile memories are. One moment, you're someone's whole world. The next, you're just another face they pass on the street. I wasn't angry anymore. Just empty. But as I stared at the ceiling, I realized something. I had a choice. I could disappear from his life like I never existed. Or I could try to remind him who I was. And that's when the fight in me woke up. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I don't even know why. I hadn't slept well for days. My body was tired, but my mind was awake. I kept thinking about him. About us. About everything we had shared. I knew the Daniel I loved was still there somewhere, buried under the fog of his memory loss. And I was going to find him. But how do you bring someone back from a place they can't even see? I didn't have the answer. But I had determination. I started small. I went back to the cafe where I first saw him again. I waited until he came in one afternoon. My heart jumped when he walked through the door. Same posture, same way of rubbing the back of his neck when he was thinking. I walked over and smiled. "Hi, Daniel." He looked up, polite as ever. "Oh, hello. Have we met before?" "Yes," I said softly. "We used to know each other." He tilted his head like he was trying to place me. "I'm sorry my memory isn't the best." "I know," I replied. "That's okay." For a second, he seemed curious. Not fully recognizing me, but not pushing me away either. I asked if I could join him. He hesitated, then nodded. We sat there for an hour, talking about small things, weather, coffee, the noise of the city. Nothing deep. But I watched him closely, looking for flickers of familiarity. Every now and then, he'd smile a certain way, or use a phrase he used to say. Little pieces of him were still there. The next day, I went back. And the day after that. Slowly, it became a routine. He started greeting me by name, though I knew it was only because I'd told him it so many times. Still, it was something. One afternoon, I brought him a small notebook. "I thought you could use this," I said. "You can write down things you want to remember." He turned it over in his hands, thoughtful. "That's actually a good idea." From that day, he carried it everywhere. Sometimes, I'd see him scribble notes during our conversations. Once, I peeked and saw my name written there, with a question mark next to it. My chest tightened. But I didn't push. I knew memories couldn't be forced. They had to find their own way back. Weeks passed. One evening, as we sat in the cafe watching the rain outside, I told him about a trip we once took together. "We went to the coast," I said. "You insisted on building a sandcastle, even though it collapsed 3 times. He laughed lightly. "That sounds like me." I smiled. "It was you. You even named the castle Fort Daniel." He chuckled again, but then his face turned serious. "You tell these stories like they really happened." "They did," I whispered. He stared at me for a long moment. "I wish I could remember." And that's when I realized, maybe this wasn't about making him remember the past exactly as it was. Maybe it was about creating enough trust, enough connection, that he'd let me be part of his present. The man I once loved was gone in some ways. But he was also here, right in front of me. And maybe, just maybe we could start again. That night, I promised myself something. I wouldn't give up. Not until I knew I had tried everything. Because losing someone to distance or time is one thing. But losing them while they're still alive, still breathing, feels like the cruelest kind of grief. And I wasn't ready to let that be the end of our story. It had been almost 2 months since I'd found out about his memory loss. 2 months of showing up, talking, laughing, and sometimes sitting in silence. At first, I thought I was chasing something impossible, a shadow of the man I once knew. But lately, little things were starting to happen. One morning, I walked into the cafe and saw him already waiting at our table. That alone made my chest feel warm. But when I sat down, he slid a coffee toward me without asking how I liked it. 1 sugar, no cream. Exactly the way I'd always taken it. I stared at the cup. "How did you know?" He shrugged casually. "I guess I remembered." That word, remembered, hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Another day, we were walking in the park, and he slowed down by the fountain. "This feels familiar," he murmured. "Like I've been here with you before." My voice caught. "You have." Moments like these were rare, but they were real. It was like watching a fog lift in slow motion, frustrating at times, but breathtaking when it happened. I started bringing small pieces of our past into the present. A photo of us laughing at the beach. The playlist we used to listen to on late-night drives. The scarf he once wrapped around my neck when I was shivering. Sometimes he'd just smile politely and set them aside. Other times, his eyes would narrow, his brow furrow, and I'd see something flicker in him. Recognition, maybe. Or at least a feeling he couldn't explain. One evening, we were sitting on a bench, watching the city lights. I asked him, "Do you ever feel like you've lost something important, even if you can't name what it is?" He looked down at his hands. "Every day," he said softly. "It's like walking through a house you've lived in your whole life, but all the rooms are empty." I swallowed hard. If you let me, maybe I can help you fill some of those rooms again. He glanced at me for a long moment. Why do you care so much? I could have told him everything. About the years we'd spent together, the love we'd shared, the promises we made. But I didn't want to overwhelm him. So I just said, because you once mattered to me. And you still do. That night, he didn't say much. But when we stood up to leave, he reached out and held my hand for the first time since the accident. It was gentle, hesitant, but it was real. From that day, things changed. He started asking me questions. Where I grew up. What my favorite food was. What made me laugh. It was almost like he wanted to know me again, piece by piece. And then came the night that made me believe this wasn't hopeless at all. We were walking back from the cafe when it started to rain. We ducked under a small awning, laughing as we shook the water from our hair. Out of nowhere, he said, "You hate the rain." I froze. How do you know that? He blinked, as if surprised by his own words. I don't know. I just do. The air between us felt electric. He had remembered something. Not from our conversations now, but from before. That tiny moment lit something inside me, a stubborn hope I couldn't shake. He wasn't all the way back. Maybe he never would be. But there were pieces of us that even memory loss couldn't erase. And I was starting to believe that love might not need a perfect past to build a future. It was a Thursday night when everything shifted. We'd been sitting at the cafe for over an hour, not talking much, just enjoying the quiet. He'd been fiddling with the little notebook I'd given him, flipping through the pages. Then suddenly he closed it and set it down. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," I said. His eyes locked on mine. Were we in love? The question made my breath catch. My mind scrambled for the right words. I didn't want to scare him or force him into remembering, but I also couldn't lie. "Yes," I said softly. "We were." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I've been having dreams lately. They don't make sense, flashes of someone laughing, holding my hand, sitting next to me in a car at night. I wake up and I feel something. And then I see you, and it feels the same. My chest ached. That's because it was me." For a long moment, he just stared at the table. "I hate that I can't remember it. I hate that you seem to know so much about me, and I know almost nothing about you." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Then let's start again. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other. If the past comes back, it does. If it doesn't, we still have now." He didn't move his hand away. Instead, his fingers slowly curled around mine. From that day, something changed between us. He let his guard down more. We spent longer hours together. We talked about fears, regrets, and the strange way life can take things from you without warning. One evening, we went for a walk along the river. The sun was setting, casting gold across the water. He stopped and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in months, soft, searching. "You know, I think you're the most familiar stranger I've ever met," he said. I laughed, but my voice shook. "And you're the stranger I'll never stop recognizing." We stood there for a while, just watching the water. It wasn't the same as before, and maybe it never would be. But I realized something that night. Love isn't only about the past you've shared. It's about the choice you make every day to stay. And in his own way, he was choosing to stay. It didn't mean there weren't hard moments. There were days when he would be distant, lost in his own mind, forgetting things we'd talked about only a week ago. On those days, it hurt. But I reminded myself why I was here. Not to force him to become the person he used to be, but to walk beside the person he was now. And somewhere in the middle of all this, I started changing too. I stopped living in the shadow of what we had been and started cherishing what we were building now. It wasn't easy, but it was real. One night, as I was leaving his apartment, he called out my name. I turned, and he just stood there looking almost shy. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me." I smiled. "I never will." And in that moment, I knew, whatever happened next, I had already won. Because I had chosen love over fear, presence over memory, and hope over loss. It's been a year since that morning in the cafe, when he looked at me like I was a stranger. A year since I found out about the accident. A year since I decided I wasn't going to let his memory loss erase us completely. Life now isn't the same as it was before, and I've learned that's okay. Daniel never got all his memories back. There are still moments when I'll mention something from our past, and he'll smile politely, as if I'm telling him a story about someone else's life. But every now and then something slips through, a laugh, a look, a word, that reminds me the man I loved is still here. We've built new routines. Sunday morning walks in the park. Tuesday night dinners at a little restaurant he likes. On rainy days, we sit by the window and make up stories about people passing by. Sometimes, when I'm talking, he'll tilt his head and just watch me, like he's memorizing my face. One evening, we were walking home when he stopped suddenly. "I don't know who I was before," he said, "but I know who I am now. And I know I want you in my life." I felt my throat tighten. That's enough for me. We don't talk about getting back what was lost anymore. We talk about building something new, something that doesn't rely on the past to survive. And you know what? That's been the biggest lesson in all of this. We spend so much of our lives clinging to what was, trying to make it last forever. But forever isn't a single stretch of time. It's the moments we choose over and over again to show up for someone. Losing the Daniel I once knew taught me more about love than having him ever did. Love is not just shared memories. It's patience, kindness, and the willingness to see someone for who they are today. There are still hard days. Days when I wish he could remember the little things. The way we used to dance in the kitchen, the nicknames we had for each other, the way he once held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. But then there are days when he makes me laugh until my stomach hurts, or looks at me like I'm the only person in the room, and I realize we're making new memories. Ones we'll both remember. If you've ever been forgotten by someone you love, I want you to know this. Your worth is not measured by whether or not someone remembers you. Love that's real will always leave its mark, even if the mind loses it. And sometimes, starting again can be even more beautiful than holding on to what's gone. He forgot me once, but in his own way, he's finding me again. And that's enough.